take a moment and allow your eyes to close while you find a position to sit in that's comfortable and stable. Don't worry about a perfect asana, but just make sure that whatever position you're in, you can hold it comfortably for 5 or 7 or 8 minutes, so you don't have to fidget and keep moving. When the body is settled, the eyes are closed. Allow the awareness to pull inward. All of that heightened awareness that's usually directed to the sights and the sounds around us, to negotiating the relationships around us. All of that awareness, pull it inward. Allow the vision to focus internally. And draw the awareness to the breath. Try to allow the attention, the awareness, the focus. Try to allow it to just merge into the breath. So instead of even being breath and a watcher of breath, there becomes nothing but breathing. If the mind wanders, don't worry. Just gently bring it back to the breath as it flows in and flows out in an unbroken, uninterrupted cycle. If you find that the mind wanders too much, you can give it a simple mantra of so hum. You can chant to yourself silently. So on the inhalations, and hum. On the exhalation. I am that. That's what the mantra means. I am that. I am one with all of creation and with the Creator. I am this infinite experience. I am not bordered or boundaried by my body or my brain. I am infinitely expansive. I am that. So, on the inhalation, hum. On the exhalation, and as you inhale, bringing from the outer to the inner, and as you exhale, taking from the inner to the outer, as you do that, sitting very, very still without moving at all, notice how, as the awareness merges with the breath, that border and boundary between the inner and the outer starts to dissolve. And that as you merge into breathing, suddenly there is no inner and there is no outer. It's just breath. Chest level. Gently rub the palms of your hands against each other. Press the palms of your hands into your closed eyes. Open the eyes and lower your hands. I'm aware of my sanskaras, my habits, my patterns. And I'm trying to change them because I know I feel happier and more peaceful when I don't give in to temptation. But some days I want to go back because it feels so good, even if it's only temporary. How do I get over my desires? So first of all, it's important to realize that sanskaras they're all impressions. So they're the ones that you want to get over, but they're also the ones you want to keep. So sanskaras in general are not something that we need to necessarily work through. In many cases, our sanskaras are actually the impressions that we want to keep. Frequently we speak about sanskaras even as values or ethics. So just a quick moment of semantic clarity. Because we also then, of course, have our sanskaras that are ones we do want to change. Those patterns, those grooves in our behavior and our way of thinking that take us where we don't want to go. As the questioner said, I usually try not to walk that path, to not give in. But sometimes I want to go back because it feels so good. So this is the Maya of desires, that it feels so goodness. And this is what happens with our senses, and it's very interesting where spirituality, psychology, and neurology intersect and overlap. Because what we know about the it feels so goodness, whether it's the ice cream or the pizza or the French fries that you're avoiding because you're on a diet, whether it's other ways that we give in to different desires or temptations or habits, what we know is that it feels so good is instantaneous. And then it's over. It doesn't feel very good for very long at all. Even if it feels good for a moment, it doesn't feel very good for very long. The pizza I ate, the French fries I ate, the ice cream that I ate, well, I've got a stomach ache later on, or if not, the next morning. The alcohol I drank or the drugs I took, well, I wake up the next day hungover, nauseous, I've got a headache, I feel miserable. So all of these it feels so goodness, you have to understand before you give into it. How long is it going to feel good for? Because if the high is 3 minutes or even 30 minutes, and then the low is the rest of the day, the week, or if you compound it with guilt along with the physical coming down, then of course there's the emotional and spiritual sense of I shouldn't have. It's never worth it. And the dilemma is every time you give in, it makes that groove deeper. So for example, if I take this piece of steel, and it doesn't work as well as if I had a piece of wood or something, but it'll be fine. If I have this piece of steel and I take my fingernail or I take a key and I keep going like this over the same place in it, eventually, even though it's steel, I will absolutely be able to carve a groove into it. Prior to doing that, if I take this glass of water and I pour the water over the plate, it's going to basically flow pretty evenly across the whole plate. As I create this groove, then when I pour water, where does most of the water go? In the groove, exactly. And what does water in the groove do to the groove? Makes it deeper. And the deeper the groove gets, what happens when more water gets poured? Where does it go? As the groove gets deeper, where does the water go? Inside the spot. The deeper the groove is, the more likely it is. I'm not talking about it overflowing. The deeper the groove is, the more likely it is that the water is going to go there. When it rains, in the monsoon season here, the water flows into the riverbank created by Mother Ganga. As you see rivers cut valleys through mountains, it's a cycle. So a glacier or a river passed through it, it cuts a groove. Now every time it rains or every time there's more water, it goes through that valley. It cuts through deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper. So those grooves are what we could consider our sanskaras. When the world happens, when life happens to me, this is how I act. So if I have a tendency, a habit toward anger or toward frustration or toward temper tantrums, every time I do that, it deepens the groove. And what that means is that every time I engage in it, I'm increasing the likelihood that next time I will engage in it. Neurologically, we say neurons that fire together wire together. So it means every time a pattern happens, it strengthens that pattern. So if every time I feel bored or depressed or restless or lonely or upset or frustrated or anything, I turn to alcohol or drugs or food or meaningless sex or whatever that pattern, that not helpful or skillful pattern in my life might be, every time I do that, I actually strengthen the groove. And it's tragically ironic because a lot of times we think, just one more time, then I'll get over it. Just this one time I'll do it and then I won't desire it anymore. Then I'll be free, then I'll be cured, then I'll be over it. But actually, every one of those times just deepens the groove. And this is where we have to create a new groove, a new sanskara. And it's hard at first. Still the water's all going in the old groove. But the minute, if I start creating a new one over here, slowly as I pour the water, some will still go in the old groove, but now some is going to go in the new groove. And then if I keep working to deepen it, to deepen it, to deepen it, to deepen it, eventually, because the brain, the mind, is constantly evolving, it's not like a steel plate that once you have a groove in it, it's not going to go away. But we're alive. We're much more like a riverbed that eventually will grow back in. And so the brain will actually change to have new patterns, new ways of being. But you have to create it. You have to do that, and you have to stop telling yourself it feels so good. Because all that does is reinforce that pattern. You have to give yourself something that feels even better. That's when we speak about being on a spiritual path and we speak about non-attachment or overcoming desires. It's not about using just sheer willpower and being miserable and not having what you want. No. It's not a path of deprivation. People think of it like that. They think, oh, spiritual people, they deprive themselves. Pujya Swamiji tells a very beautiful and funny story of when he was very young building the Hindu Jain temple in Pittsburgh. And a young woman, very close member of the community, said to him, she was asking him about she had just recently gotten married, and she was asking him about his choice of celibacy and renunciation. And she says to him, "You don't know what you're missing." And decades later, when her children were getting married, they came to seek blessings maybe just after the wedding. Because at that time when she had said that to him, he had just smiled. And he had said, "You don't know what you're missing." And when they came to him decades later, she said to him, "Now I understand what you mean." So when we're in the throes of giving in to those desires, you think, yeah, this is what it is. You think anything else would be utter deprivation. But what you don't realize until you give yourself the opportunity to experience the joy, the bliss, the contentment that's stable. It's not constantly going up and down based on the chemistry of your brain and the reward centers of your brain, but that's actually stable. Until you give yourself the opportunity to experience the joy of truth, the joy of love that's not about a night of passion, but that's about an expansion in your heart and yourself, then you'll think it's deprivation. But you have to give yourself at least the opportunity to experience spiritual joy, peace, bliss, all of the things that we experience, truth, so that you actually know what it is that feels so good, other than just a few minutes of sensory pleasure or a few minutes of some brain chemistry that's rewarding. But that real, constant, never shifting experience of joy. But you have to give yourself the space for that. Does anyone here have any questions?
What is our energy? In your example, what is our energy?
What is our energy?
Water.
Oh, water. Yes, exactly. So in the example when we were speaking about grooves, and I was speaking about the water flowing through it, it's not only energy, it's also its attention, its awareness, its focus, and it's also action, because action reinforces itself. And so if every time I'm stressed, I reach for a cigarette, that becomes a habit. It's an action. That's a groove. But then, if I lay new grooves so that every time I'm stressed, I take a walk in the park, or I meditate, or I chant, or I read poetry, that's creating a new groove. So it's energy, it's attention, it's intention, and it's actual actions. It's all of that. All of what we do, think, say, creates those grooves. Yeah. Yes.
Is everything in life predetermined? And is astrology a proper science? And
Okay.
are we really bound by the karmas of the previous life?
So he said, is everything predetermined? Is astrology actually a science? And are we bound by this law of karma? So it's three separate questions, but they interweave together. So is everything predetermined? Yes. But here's the issue. When we think of predetermination, most of us think about it as hundreds or thousands of years ago, as though there were some moment in history that were the moment that everything was written. Predetermined simply means prior to this exact moment. So, was it predetermined that you were going to be sitting in satsang tonight? Yes. And for some of you, because we all have different karmic packages, because there's different types of karma, different types of action, some that bears fruit immediately, some that's more of we talk about as short-term investments or long-term investments. So for some of you, it might have been predetermined a long time ago, when you started embarking on a spiritual path that brought you to Rishikesh. You came searching. You were looking for, how can I get spiritual connection? How can I get answers? So you looked out for, where is there satsang? And you came. For some of you, the pre may simply be that you were in the arti and you were walking up from arti and the person you were with said, let's go to satsang. Predetermined, yeah, but 5 minutes ago rather than 5 or 10 years ago. So pre simply means prior to this moment. And what that means is, right now, right here, is the pre of tomorrow, next week, next month, next year. Right now, we are determining where we will be in our future. That's where that intersection of destiny and free will comes. Right here, right now, you're here. There was a show on TV when I was very, very young where this little witch would rub her nose like this and be able to do magic tricks. But we can't do that. You can't rub your nose and be in Paris instead, or rub your nose and be in LA instead. You're here. But where you are tomorrow or next week or next year is based on what you do, what you think, right here, right now. All of the thoughts. Because as you sit here, There's an infinite number of different thoughts you can be having, different ways that you can be responding to this moment. Some of you may be thinking, oh my God, I can't believe that I've, never been in satsang. You may commit yourself. You may extend your stay in India or in Rishikesh. You may take what we're saying and change how you live accordingly. Some of you may be sitting here thinking, I can't believe I'm here and not eating pizza. As soon as I can get out, I'm gonna go eat pizza. And from now on, every night, only pizza. But each of those thoughts is going to lead to a very different tomorrow. And so if tomorrow we say, well, was it predetermined that you were going to be in satsang or in a pizzeria? Well, yeah, it was determined right here, right now, when you decided, this is what I need. Or, I only want pizza. The spiritual practices that we do. It's like exercise. Think about it. If I say to you, we have doctors here with us this evening. If we say, well, was it predetermined that I was going to have high blood pressure, heart disease? Well, yes. Some aspects of it were predetermined, as in your genetics. Maybe you have a genetic predisposition to certain issues of the heart. But then, when you started eating nothing but hamburgers and French fries, that became another component of predetermining that at some point you were going to develop heart disease. And then when you decided that instead of getting up in the morning and exercising, you were going to stay up really late so that you couldn't get up in the morning and that you were never going to exercise, again, you were predetermining that you would have heart disease. Was it predetermined thousands and thousands of years ago somewhere in the sky? No. Our own actions, that's what karma means, action. In this life, in previous lives, that is the that is determining right now. So take care of today, because it's determining tomorrow. I saw a beautiful sign several years ago that said, watch your thoughts and you will see the future. Watch your thoughts and you will see the future. As I think, so I'm going to act. And as I act, so I create. But also, it's even more subtle than that. Because as I think, so I actually energetically create my reality even right now. Heaven or hell, right here, right now, it's in my mind. We create it. So, yeah, it is predetermined by you. So figure out what you want to destine yourself for and create it. And lastly, with regard to astrology, is it a science? Absolutely, it's a science. But like any science, that doesn't mean that every astrologer is a good scientist. It's like saying, is medicine really a science? Well, sure, if you have a good doctor. Are there people practicing medicine who have no idea what they're doing and making fools of people? Absolutely. Are there astrologers who have no idea what they're doing and making fools of people? Absolutely. Whatever field you go to, inevitably there will be people who have no idea what they're doing making fools of people for a buck. But that doesn't mean that the science isn't real. And here for me is how I know that astrology is real. Because I'm a scientist at heart, not an astrologer, but a scientist at heart. And so for me, it's about the scientific truth. How do I know it's real? Is it just about someone saying it's real? And astrology is actually something that scientifically we can all appreciate. So, basically what astrology says, the foundation of it is that the energetic pulls between the different planets, the moon, on your body have an impact. That's pretty much all it says. Astrology says there is an impact upon you by the energetic pulls of the planets, the moon, on your body. Okay, well, so if anybody's ever been to the ocean or lived near the ocean, you know that every day we have this thing called high tide and low tide. Well, what causes high tide and low tide? The earth doesn't tilt and then tilt. What causes it? The moon, right? The gravitational pull between the moon and the earth is what causes high tide and low tide. Now, I have no idea how many gallons of water there are or liters of water there are in the ocean, but it's a lot. And that pull is enough to move however many hundreds of millions or hundreds of billions or even trillions maybe of liters of water by many feet. You live on a beach, and high tide and low tide is not a matter of a few inches. In some places, it's literally a matter of 10, 20, 30 feet. Full moon, even more. Now, the human body is made up mostly of what? 70% water. Okay.
And the ratio of the water in the body of salt and water is same
Ah,
as the sea.
I love that. Thank you. So the ratio of the water in the body, the ratio of water to salt in the body, is the same as it is in the ocean. So we actually are made up not only of water, but we are made up of ocean. So the idea that the gravitational pull between the moon and the earth is strong enough to move hundreds of millions or billions or trillions of gallons of water 20, 30 feet, but it doesn't have any impact on me, has always seemed like a very foolish scientific stance to take. We know that it moves water, and we know that we are water. And so for me, from simply that standpoint, I have always believed that astrology must work. Now, here's the issue, though. When you speak about horoscopes, think about it. Let's just stay with only the ocean. Keep it simple. We're talking only the moon. Forget even all the other planets for a moment. Let's say that I have a house on the beach. And let's say that I like to go for a morning walk. Let's also say that I can't swim. Now, if you were a good scientist and you could read the tides, or you could just even went online and punched in where I live and found out the high tide of where I am, and I said to you, What's my horoscope for tomorrow? You could very rightly say to me, I see danger in the morning hours. Because in that reading of the tides, you can see a very unusually high tide. You know that tide is coming in the morning. It's coming in higher than usual. You know I like to walk in the morning. You know I can't swim. So you could say, I see danger in the morning hours. Now that's not magic. That's not voodoo science. That's common sense. A high tide, a morning walk, a woman who doesn't swim. Danger. And maybe you might say to me, be extra careful in the morning. You might even say, stay out of the water. Avoid your morning walk. Or you might say something like, the mountains are more auspicious for you in the morning hours than the seaside. Either way, what is it? It's a reading. It's a reading of the magnetic gravitational pull with knowing about me. So this is what astrology is. Exactly how it works, I don't know. But what I know is that if we can have that much information, just from the moon, just on the water, then you add in all the other planets into the soup, all the energy, all the different aspects. Of course it has an impact upon us. We're energetic beings. If you weren't impacted by energy, if you walked off a building, you would fly instead of plummet to the ground. But the same gravity that pulls the tide toward the moon is the same gravity that pulls you from the rooftop to the ground. So of course it impacts us. But again, that doesn't mean that everyone who claims to be an astrologer knows what they're doing. It also doesn't mean that the horoscopes you read in the newspaper are right. Doesn't mean that every single person ever born in any year, any part of the world, in a 1 month period, is going to have the same type of day tomorrow. But what it does mean, like any other science, is that if you have a good scientist who has the right tools, who knows what they're doing, and who knows you, they're going to be able to apply these laws to you in a way that's beneficial. It's never 100%. That I see danger in the morning doesn't mean you will die. What it means is if you don't take extra precaution, if you don't change something. And this is what astrology can tell you, is right now, this is not a very auspicious time to start a new business. Somebody else may say, I see financial loss. Well, it doesn't mean that's inevitable. It just means be careful. It's like the meteorologist saying, I see danger tomorrow. Well, it's only dangerous if I walk on the beach. The loss is only there if you disregard caution. So what astrology can give us is these are times where you might want to be careful about this, or you might want to be careful about that, or it's auspicious for this, it's auspicious for that. So why not use it? I'm always in favor of whatever tools we can possibly use to give ourselves a better chance at living the best, fullest lives that we can. And sure, astrology is one of them. Why not?
What is the difference between satsang and bhakti?
Satsang and bhakti. So we'll take this as the last question. He said, what's the difference between satsang and bhakti? So, semantically, the words, definition, satsang literally means in the presence of truth. That's what the word means. Bhakti is devotion. Now, they are both beautiful spiritual practices. They can overlap a lot. In your bhakti, you can be in satsang, so in your love and your devotion and your worship of God, your love of God, you can be in the presence of truth, of course. In satsang, in the presence of truth, well, what is the highest truth? Divinity. What is that which runs through us, that which is us at the core? When we speak about soul and consciousness and truth, it's love. So bhakti, devotion, love for God, well, that's truth, if you can feel it. So satsang takes us into the truth. Bhakti is that exquisite, glorious, juicy love of God that connects us to God. They're all ways of connecting to God. Use them all. And just connect. For some people, that bhakti comes very easily. For some people, love of God comes very easily. For some people, it doesn't. And that's okay. That's why we've been given different paths. Jnana Yoga, Karma Yoga, Raja Yoga. We've been given so many different paths to connect to God. So that whatever our...
But there is no proof of this.
Of what?
Raj Yoga and this yoga and that yoga.
What do you mean by there's no proof? He said there's no proof of this yoga.
Oh, yoga is a proof, but you say it's a different. Those are feelings of somebody which cannot be explained.
Okay. So...
You can yourself feel, but you can't express.
Absolutely. So this is great. We have a doctor, and he and I were speaking earlier today at a beautiful hospital where I went and gave a talk this morning, and I said, come to satsang. So he says, this yoga, this connection with God, this is a feeling, but you can't express it. There's no proof of it. And this is the tragedy of science. And I say this to you as someone who loves science. The tragedy of science is that it has tried to claim jurisdiction over that over which it has no jurisdiction. And that's the ultimate tragedy. So science can prove, can express, can understand things that can be seen or measured with the tools of science. So a microscope, a telescope, a scale, these are our tools. And based on our tools, we have a truth. A few hundred years ago, if I had said to you, the earth is flat.
That was said by the Christ.
Said by a lot of people. It was the truth. Why? Because the tools that science had at that time made it look like the earth was flat. Look right out at the horizon. It must be flat. Keep going. You'll walk off the end. It looks flat. When my tools are only these two eyes, we think the earth is flat. Then science develops. Our tools develop. Now suddenly our tools tell us the earth is round. We laugh at the fact that hundreds of years ago we thought it was flat. Hundreds of years ago, they thought that everything in the universe revolved around the earth. That was when the sun rose and set. It was the sun revolving around the earth. The moon rising and setting. Everything in the universe revolved around the earth. Now we know, oh wait, we revolve around the sun. But who knows whether hundreds of years down the line, hang on, who's to know whether hundreds of years down the line, as our tools increase, our truth won't change. And they'll be laughing that, ha, 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 those people thought the earth was round. Ha, ha, those people thought that the earth revolved around the sun. And so here is your dilemma. If for you the truth is only that which the tools in your hands can tell you, whether it's my five senses or whether it's the tools of science, you will have a lot of adherents. There's a lot of people in your camp. The dilemma is that you deprive yourself of all of that which our scientific tools haven't yet been able to measure, like love. Forget Raja Yoga. Take love. Can you prove it? Of course not. But if we had to say, because I can't prove it or express it or show it, I'm not going to commit myself to it. I'm not going to open myself to it. I'm not going to walk a path of it. How deeply, deeply deprived we would all be. And so, whether we speak about divine connection, you speak about bhakti, love, you speak about wisdom. Prove wisdom. You can't prove it. Show me a tool that can measure wisdom. I can give you a test to measure how well you know the facts I'm checking. I even can give you an IQ test that theoretically tests your innate intelligence. But I cannot test wisdom. That which matters is unprovable by the tools that science has. And that's fine. But what it means is that we have to allow ourselves to use the tools of science for science. And to not depend upon them, to not try to bring them into the rest of our world, because otherwise we deprive ourselves of all that matters. So no, you're right. You can't express it. You can't prove it. But nonetheless, do it. Because the only proof we have is that those who do have an outcome that is very different from those who don't. Those who love have an outcome that is very different from those who don't. Those who meditate, those who pray. And by praying, I don't mean, oh God, give me a Mercedes. I mean, who connect to God in love, have a very different outcome in life than those who don't. And so we don't want to lose our opportunity just because the tools of science haven't yet gotten to the point where they can measure some of it. They can measure some of it. We've got brain scans and science is getting better. But it's the inner science that gives us the way of measuring this, and that gives us the proof, and that gives us the expression.
I would like to.
I have just difference.
I'm going to actually, just because